Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and we have a packed show for you this week. Lots going on in Atlanta, Georgia, at UFC Fight Night. UFC on ESPN, technically the official title of that event. UFC on ESPN, Usman versus Buckley. And it was an absolutely pivotal fight in the welterweight division. We will break that down on this week's show. We'll also run down the other big results from that fight card. Lots going on and a little bit of controversy. Well, I say a little bit of controversy. A lot of controversy in the featured preliminary card fight between Paul Craig and Rodolfo Bellato. We will talk about that on this edition of the RDX Sports Podcast. We will also look back at a huge night in Germany. Octagon 72 delivered a huge night at the Eden Football Stadium in Prague, Czech Republic. 26,000 fans in attendance for another huge stadium show. Octagon proving that stadium shows can be done and can be done well. Huge event over there. We will recap the best of that on this week's show. And finally, we will wrap things up with a quick fire preview of what's coming this weekend from Baku, Azerbaijan. The UFC heading to Azerbaijan for the very first time, heading to Baku for a UFC Fight Night event featuring RDX Sports' newest brand ambassador himself, Khalil Roundtree Jr., who will be in action in the main event of the evening on Saturday night over there in Azerbaijan. We will get to that on this edition of the show. It's going to be a packed one. Let's get this thing rolling. All right, let's kick things off with what just happened this past weekend at UFC Fight Night in Atlanta, Georgia. Kamaru Usman taking on Joaquin Buckley in a huge fight for the welterweight division. It felt like all the momentum was with Joaquin Buckley. Kamaru Usman hadn't won a fight since 2021, I think it was, stretching back ages. Lost 3 on the spin, but as I warned last week, those 3 defeats were all very close. Obviously, the knockout loss to Leon Edwards was pretty emphatic, but it came at the end of a fight that he was completely dominating up until the point that he wasn't. And then the rematch against Leon was a super close affair as well. That was competitive. I think it ended in a majority decision. Then we had Kamaru Usman taking on Khamzat Chimaev in a fight that really he had no business being in. He moved up to middleweight, took the fight on a ridiculously short amount of notice, gets another majority decision loss. That means he headed into the fight on a 3-fight skid. No win since November of 2021 when he defeated Colby Covington to retain his UFC welterweight title. He obviously went on to lose that to our boy Leon Edwards at UFC 278 in Salt Lake City. But this was a huge fight for Kamaru Usman, really looking to remind the world that he is still that guy. He is still one of the very best in the world, and he is still a major problem for the welterweight division, the 170-pound division. And he took on Joaquin Buckley, who was in a huge run of form. You know, I think he was on a 7 or 8 fight win streak, knocking people out left, right, and centre. Finished Colby Covington last time out, looking really good doing it as well. This was a breakout fight for him. He was already breaking out already, but to defeat a former undisputed champion in Kamaru Usman would really have catapulted him into the title mix at 170 pounds. So it's a big fight for him, big fight for Kamaru Usman. Who would come out on top in that headliner in the ATL? Well, it was Kamaru Usman, and he did it in relatively dominant fashion. He really pushed the pace, closed the distance on Joaquin Buckley, who uncharacteristically, I thought, was a little bit hesitant to let his shots go. Wasn't as aggressive as we've seen. I think when he fought Colby, I think he saw that Colby was a little bit of a wounded animal going in. His confidence might not have been as high as it had been in previous years. And Buckley was just all over him like a cheap suit and finished him in fine style. That wasn't going to happen against Kamaru Usman. Usman came back looking like $1 million at the weigh-in, looking as good as we've ever seen him. Absolutely fantastic shape for a man who is in his 39th year. And, supposedly on the back end of his career, certainly in the back 9 of his career, right, in golfing terms. But he's still very much got it. And as he said after the fight, he gets the unanimous decision, 49-46 twice, and a 48-47, which of those different scores, the 48-47 was probably the most controversial, if controversial is even the right word to use. I think most people watching it thought that it was a 4-1 split in terms of how the rounds went. Buckley's best round was round 5. You know, he came on strong in the last round. I think he knew that the fight was sort of ebbing away from him, and he just needed to empty the chamber and go for it. And credit to him, he really did go for it, but didn't have enough in the tank to get it done. Wasn't able to hurt Usman enough and get that late stoppage. So the fight and the win and the momentum flips back to the Nigerian Nightmare, the former welterweight champion. And he's now looking up. He's now looking at who he can face next. He wants the title fight next. He wants the winner of Islam Makhachev versus Jack Della Maddalena, which of course has not been made official, but common consensus is that will be the championship fight at 170 pounds a little bit later on this year. And if Islam Makhachev wins it, a battle of 2 pound-for-pound stars, you know, someone Usman used to be right at the top of that pound-for-pound list, that spot now belongs to Islam Makhachev. That would be an interesting fight. But should it be made over some of those other great title fights that are in the mix at the top of that welterweight division? Ian Machado Gary is up there. Sean Brady has earned his shot for sure. Bilal Muhammad, former champion, still ranked number 1. He's probably going to need to win another one to get back in there. Bilal Muhammad versus Kamaru Usman would be the fight I would book. I would love to see that. But we will see how all of that shakes out, because the welterweight division right now is absolutely teeming with talent. There is so much talent in that welterweight division. You could perm anyone or any combination of fights for that 170 pound division is absolutely stacked. But the man with the hot hand right now coming out of UFC Atlanta is Kamaru Usman. He has stolen Joaquin Buckley's momentum. He has stolen his thunder and he snapped his win streak. And now the man who has declared to the rest of the division that he is and always has been the boogeyman at 170 pounds. And he's looking to put the fear of God into the guys at the very top of that division. He certainly doesn't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. Huge win for Kamaru Usman. One of the classiest operators as well. I have to say this. Like he did his interviews leading up to the fight. He is thoughtful in his answers. He's respectful in his approach. He has that inner confidence, but he's also showing that personal vulnerability, which I think really helps convey him as a person to the viewing audience, saying that, yeah, he might have had all these fights, he might have had these championship successes, he might have been the pound-for-pound best fighter in the UFC for a little while there. He still gets nervous ahead of fights. He still carries fear with him into the octagon. And I think that's a healthy thing. Some people will look at that and go, well, that's weakness. You know, that's weak. It's not weakness, I think, to understand yourself and to realize that your body reacts and your mind reacts in different ways to different things. Weakness is arguably ignoring those things. You know, I think the strength is knowing that you have these things you have to deal with and then dealing with them. And that's what Kamaru Usman has been doing. That's what he did on Saturday night. And he picked up an absolutely massive victory to put himself right back in the mix at 170 pounds. All right, co-main event of the evening. Rose Namajunas taking on Miranda Maverick in the women's flyweight division. Of course, Rose, a former strawweight world champion, looking to move her way up at strawweight against Miranda Maverick, who is a tough out for anybody in the division. But Namajunas was just too fast, too slick, too good. 30-27s twice and 29-28s, getting the job done for thug Rose Namajunas. Looks like Miranda might have picked up a nasty leg injury, whether it's a knee injury, an ACL or an MCL. We will see. But she might be out for a little while, which is a sad thing for her. Obviously, when you lose to someone with a big name like that, but it's on the scorecards, you want to get back in the mix. You want to get back in the gym and then get yourself another fight booked as quickly as you can. Try and maintain your position in that pecking order at 125 pounds, which is quite a busy weight class in the women's divisions right now, the flyweight division. There's lots going on. We have a new top contender in that division in Natalia Silva. We obviously have, you know, a huge test potentially for her in Valentina Shevchenko as the champion, but we've got Zhang Weili potentially looking to move up and challenge for the belt as well. Lots going on at 125 pounds. But for Rose Namajunas, who wants to be in those conversations and in the mix herself, that was a big win for her. She'll get a bump up those rankings, I would imagine, as a result of that win. Also on the main card in Atlanta, Edmund Shabazian defeating Andre Petrosky. I put my teeth in. Real striker versus grappler matchup, this one, in terms of the stars coming in. That's kind of how it played out on the night. Shabazian doing very, very well to keep the fight in his realm for the majority of that 3-round fight. 230-27s, 129-28. He gets the job done. And he's always had incredible talent. And it's just been converting that to fight night and being able to really put his skills on display against someone who was coming in as an unabashed, I am a grappler, I am a submission threat, and I'm going to prove it. I'm one of the best grapplers in the division. He was able to nullify that threat using his footwork and his striking and his defensive wrestling. Excellent job by Edmund Shabazian. Also an excellent job, Rarity defeating Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, former flyweight champion of the world, former bantamweight champion of the world, of course, taking on Raoni Barcelos. Barcelos getting the job done, 29-28 across the board. He's going to move up. He might not be the most fashionable name in the division, but he is a dangerous man to deal with. Technically excellent, pretty good everywhere. He's a name that when you see it on a fight contract, that's not going to be an easy night for you if you get that one through the post or in the email. So interesting to see how they book him next, because the bantamweight division has plenty of killers in it, and Barcelos wants to be in amongst it at 135 pounds. Looking at 185 pounds, Mansour Abdul Malik getting the win on the scorecards against Cody Brundage. The fight was halted late on due to an accidental head clash, unfortunately. Meant that Brundage was unable to continue, which was a real shame, because it was a good competitive fight up to that point. They went to the scorecards, and a technical decision was rendered with the scorecards reading 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. It was an early in the round finish. It was like 36 seconds into the third round, and yet they still scored those 36 seconds, which is why you've got what looked like complete scorecards in the result there. So Mansour Abdul Malik getting the job done. Wasn't the spectacular finish that he was chasing. He had an incredible rate of finishing opponents and doing it early. I don't think he'd ever been to a third round in his career up until Saturday night. But he looks a real talent. He's got so much in the locker in terms of his ability in the cage, his ability to put himself across. He's got that sort of quiet confidence about him, and he looks like a potential star at 185 pounds, but he isn't there yet. It's a learning process, and in the UFC, all the lessons are difficult ones. So Cody Brundage is as tough as they come, as he proved on Saturday night, but it was Mansour Abdul Malik who got the job done on the scorecards, albeit via a slightly anticlimactic stoppage in terms of it being a technical decision due to an accidental clash of heads. And the opening bout on the main card, Alonzo Menifeld versus Umar Sy. I will have no qualms about this. I thought Umar Sy was going to win this fight. He undefeated going in. I'm really high on him going in. And I felt that Menifeld blows very hot and cold. He looks really good, or he labours and really struggles. And cardio has been an issue for him in the past. Even if he's able to go through fights, the pace tends to slow down a little bit. He does carry a lot of muscle mass, but with that muscle mass comes a lot of power. And I think Umar Sy was wary of a lot of that power. But as it went through, it was a good competitive fight, but Menifeld was the one who held the upper hand over those 3 rounds. 29-28 across the board for Alonzo Menifeld, who hands Umar Sy the first loss of his MMA career. Now, let's talk about the fight that everyone is talking about, and it isn't the main event. It was the featured preliminary card fight. Light heavyweight division. Paul Craig returning to 205 to take on Rodolfo Bellato. This fight was booked for a few weeks previous and was pushed back because Bellato had contracted herpes, of all things, and was unable to compete. So there was that. That pushed it back. And now what we have is a fight that was stopped 1 second 1 second from the end of the very first round, and rendered a no contest due to an illegal upkick by Paul Craig that officially rendered Rodolfo Bellato unable to continue. They are the black and white facts of what happened in terms of the foul, the result, the time, and the round. However, what happened in that fight was slightly crazy. I've not seen too much like this before. Let's get the foul out of the way first. What happened was Craig was down on his back looking to draw Bellato into his guard, which he likes to do. He's like the Venus flytrap of the UFC. He draws you in, and then once he's got you, then all things can change. Just ask Magomed Ankalaev, who spent 2 and a bit, almost 3 rounds, beating the snot out of Paul Craig, only to then get submitted with a triangle armbar in the very last second of the last round. He remains the only fighter to have defeated Magomed Ankalaev, your current light heavyweight champion of the world. So, and he's done it to countless others as well. Against Bellato, Bellato was sort of looking to split his time really between diving into guard and throwing heavy ground and pound, and then getting the hell out of danger and looking to get up. And it was in the process of him looking to sort of withdraw from the guard that Craig threw an up kick that kind of glancingly connected. It kind of hit the corner of the jawline and then into the neck a little bit. But Bellato was still down. He still had a knee down. And he was definitely a grounded fighter. If he'd have been like a split second later, his knee would have been off the ground. It would have just been the 2 points of contact. It would have just been the 2 feet on the floor. He'd have been fined for a legal shot, right? However, this was an illegal shot. Bellato goes down, appears to gesture to the referee on the way down, and then, for all intents and purposes, it looks like he's been knocked out. They bring him round. There's a bit of confusion, or apparent confusion, and then after a little bit of that confusion, he then decides he's going to try and wrestle the referee, which we've seen this many times. Fighters get knocked out, and as soon as they come around, they think they're in the middle of a fight. They see someone in front of them. That's obviously their opponent, they think, even though this guy's wearing trousers. They go for the legs. It's an instinctual thing. Now, in this case, we had a situation where he was gesticulating to the referee on the way down, like asking for the foul. And then it seemed like, having asked for the foul and he continued his fall to the canvas, he then all of a sudden was unconscious. So I don't know whether he was unconscious or not. What I will say is it looked decidedly iffy. Now, I can give that opinion because that's what it looked like, right? I can't tell you definitively whether he was cheating. I can't tell you definitively whether it was a completely legitimate knockout and everything that followed was an honest response. Me, looking at it, it looked weird. And I've seen fighters get knocked out before. I mean, just watch Anderson Silva when he gets knocked out by Chris Weidman. As soon as he wakes up, he's on the referee's leg straight away. There's no looking and assessing and then going for the leg. It's all instinctual. It's almost like head down, blind grab. You know, that seems to be how it seems to work. It's happened in one championship very, very many times. I've seen it. Olivier Coste having to use some of his defensive jiu-jitsu skills when he's been caught with guys after they've been KO'd, and all of a sudden they come back round. It's like, go for the legs. But this one looks a bit weird. And that's why the pushback has been so loud on social media, whether it be fans calling him out for flopping, which over in the UK is basically accusing him of taking a dive, which happens a lot in football. And they'll try and draw a foul, or they'll try and embellish the reaction to something that is a foul just to make sure that it's seen, or to try and get a harsher sanction on the person who committed the foul. I don't think there's any doubt over the presence of a foul here. Paul Craig committed a foul. He's admitted as such. It was an illegal shot. It was unfortunate. It was just one of those split-second timing things. Had he been a split second later, it would have been a legal strike. But unfortunately, in reality, it wasn't. But the reaction from Bellato is what's drawn a lot of criticism. And Anthony Smith, the former light heavyweight title challenger turned UFC analyst, did not pull his punches in criticizing Bellato and saying that, you know, it looked dodgy. It did not look right, and he thinks that Bellato was trying to steal a win effectively by overreacting to something. So, and he wasn't alone. Loads of fighters were on social media sort of intimating very similar things. So it'd be very interesting, and I don't know whether we'll ever know this because these sorts of things don't always get out. What were the UFC matchmakers' reaction to that? What was Hunter Campbell's reaction to that? And what was Dana White's reaction to that? Because we've seen fighters who have done some crazy stuff inside the octagon before, and they've been punished pretty severely for it. Paul Daly sucker punches Josh Koscheck at the end of a fight when the fight's over, kicked out the UFC. Igor Severino bites his opponent in the arm, gets bounced from the UFC. Rodolfo Bellato has not established himself in the UFC yet by any stretch. If the UFC brass think that Bellato was play acting and was trying to use Anthony Smith was sort of steal a win, then there could be some big repercussions for him. The only person who knows for sure is Bellato himself. And if we take the view, just to look at both sides of it, if we take the view that he did overact this and he did embellish this, the worst thing he could do at this point is hold his hands up to it, because his reputation is in tatters. He's got to go with this now. He has to insist that this was all legit, or this was all legit and it was just a bizarre set of circumstances that played out. The person who I would be equally as concerned for here is Paul Craig. Paul Craig was on a pretty duff run of form. He was really struggling. He dropped down to middleweight. Things did not go well for him at middleweight. Well, he had a great win on his debut at middleweight. Andre Muniz finishes Andre Muniz in the second round in London. Great performance. I was there for that one. But after that, he loses to Brendan Allen, gets submitted. Loses to Caio Borralho, gets knocked out. And then gets outpointed in a pretty dull fight by Bo Nickel. So that's 3 losses on the bounce for him. He decides to move back to light heavyweight. He has his fight rebooked for a few weeks after his original fight date due to no fault of his own. And then he makes a mistake, throws an illegal up kick, and then we have all of this strangeness that happened afterwards. What we do know is that Paul Craig has not picked up a victory here. And he lost 3 prior. So will the UFC kind of do him a solid and keep him around and give him another opportunity at light heavy, given he was moving back to the division? Or will they just say, do you know what, we're kind of done now? I hope for Paul Craig's sake that he gets another bite of the cherry, because he is someone who always brings a degree of entertainment. He's a great interview. He's a great character. He represents Scotland in the octagon with pride and with passion, as does Chris Duncan, who is moving up the lightweight ranks. But those two in particular, you know, they've really done a lot for Scottish MMA in the modern era of the UFC. Rob Whiteford a few years prior, but yeah, Paul Craig has done a lot of good in the UFC. He's been sort of peaks and troughs a little bit in his form. And I think he was hoping that moving back to light heavyweight would mark a rediscovery of the real Paul Craig, you know, someone who could really make a dent in the weight class, which he was doing before he moved back down. So we shall see. We shall see. I have my fingers crossed that Beardew is not a casualty of a bizarre set of circumstances this past weekend. But if you've seen the incident yourself, and you can go to the RDX Sports blog, blogs.rdxsports.com, check out the article where it's Anthony Smith's comments on that incident. There is a video embedded in that of said incident, and I'll let you judge for yourselves. If you've seen it already, I'm sure you already have your own opinion. Mine is, it does not look good. I find it difficult to believe that was a completely legitimate response to a knockout. It just doesn't look right to me. But who knows? Who knows? You know, there's some crazy stuff happens in MMA. So we will see. We will see. But be interesting to see what the fallout from this is, whether they just rebook them again for further down the line, stick them on another fight card and go, listen, you two, sort it out. Let's have a proper, let's get a proper result from this and then go from there. Or whether the UFC just says, okay, we've had enough of this matchup now. Let's make some something different. So fingers crossed, but fingers crossed for Paul Craig, and he sticks around and he gets a chance to continue his UFC career at 205 pounds. Because even though the fight was stopped prematurely, and unfortunately, it was actually shaping up to be a decent Paul Craig performance, I thought. So he didn't look in enormous trouble when everything happened. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances. It wasn't like he was desperately trying to keep himself in the fight at that point. So we'll see how all that shakes out. But yeah, as I say, fingers crossed for Paul Craig. And, you know, hopefully we see him in the Octagon again sooner rather than later. All right, that was UFC Atlanta. But before the action turned to matters in the United States, there was a huge stadium show right on this side of the pond in Prague, Czech Republic, Octagon 72. If you've not checked out Octagon shows, you really are missing out. They really are the gold standard of big arena shows here in Europe. And if you're looking at the two best promotions in Europe, you've got Cage Warriors, which is firmly established as like the premium pathway for fighters looking to get from the regional scene to the UFC. Their events in the UK, like the standard of the matchmaking is top draw. The events are incredible. Octagon have a different business model to Cage Warriors. While Cage Warriors are looking to be part of the ecosystem that drives talent to the UFC and build stars that will then go on and become stars on the world stage, Octagon are looking to build stars for that particular region that they're in. They're huge in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and they've absolutely exploded in popularity in Germany, filling football stadiums. Last year, I was at a huge football stadium in Frankfurt, Germany. That's had World Cup matches and all sorts, and there were 59,000 fans there, which absolutely insane amount of people watching an MMA event. And the thing about stadium shows, Dana White has said in the past that he doesn't like stadium shows, like the fan experience is not great. Octagon's fan experience is really good in the arena, having been there and been a part of it. I was a little wary of being in such a big arena when I went to Octagon last year, and we were right up in the gods. We couldn't be much further away from the cage where we were sat, but the experience of being there was pretty special. It's one of the most memorable MMA events I have attended personally as a member of the media. It was a fantastic event. But the staging aside, the fights are what really bring the fans to the shows. And the fights are invariably very, very good. They're well matched. They're exciting. The storytelling is great. And Octagon 72 had all of that and then some on Saturday night. The main event was Carlos Vermola taking on Attila Vey. This was their trilogy fight. Although it wasn't 100% sort of clarified at the end of the main event, I think this was both of their retirement fights. I didn't see them both put their gloves down inside the cage and make a big deal of walking away as retired fighters. But that was the storyline heading in. This was the final fight for Carlos Vermola and Attila Vey in Octagon and in their careers. Attila Vey, former Bellator heavyweight champion. Carlos Vermola, two-time champion in Octagon, long-time UFC veteran from way back. They were one win apiece heading into their main event. Attila Vey winning the first one by knockout, Carlos Vermola winning the second one by submission. How would the third one go? It went all the way to the judges' scorecards, and it might not have been the prettiest fight to watch. Carlos Vermola's fighting style is not one that is particularly conducive to highlight reel footage. He loves to just throw punches, shooting for a takedown. Lot of extended work against the cage, but the ability of the commentary team, and this is huge props to Brian Lacey and Luke Barnett for their commentary on this event, because with a different commentary team, this Vermola-Vey fight would have had not anywhere near the level of interest in it, because some of the action was quite slow. Some of the action, dare I say, it was a little bit boring up against the fence with not that much happening. The referee, Pavel Toj, was trying to keep things going. He was separating them, but then it was going straight back to the fence again so many times, and it really was a war of attrition. And Lacey and Barnett did such a good job of telling that story, keeping you invested in what was going on, even when the amount of actual action that you saw was relatively small and wasn't that sort of wow highlight reel sort of techniques that everybody loves to see inside the cage. It was a real grind fest of a fight, but it was a battle of wills between two grizzled veterans of the game, two absolutely beloved figures in that part of the world, and it looked like Vermola was pretty much going to steamroll his way to a lopsided victory on the scorecards. But Vey came back halfway through the fight, and I had the fight even going into the last round. And going into that last round, I thought Vey was the one who was maybe gonna just nick it in the last round, but Vermola was having none of it, and he just found another reserve of energy for that last round, charged across, took Vey to the mat, and that really was all she wrote. Just, he gets the win on the scorecards, 48-47 twice, 49-46. And such was the stature of their rivalry and how highly they're thought of in that part of the world. They commissioned a special belt, the Infinity Belt, which they presented to Carlos Vermola at the end of that fight. And two rivals who have been going back and forth over several years, I think have now completely buried the hatchet, even if there was one at this point. The respect has long since been earned over the course of those three fights. And what those two guys have done to help grow Octagon as a promotion, they're two Octagon Hall of Famers for sure. So that was the main event, and an important main event for Octagon MMA, even if the fight itself, from an action standpoint, might not necessarily generate a whole load of highlight reel content. The level of importance of the fight, the investment the fans had in those two fighters, and the ability of, as I say, Brian Lacey and Luke Barnett to actually convey that to an audience that might not necessarily have been that on that train heading in. A lot of people are new to watching Octagon MMA, and they need that educational process. They need to know this isn't red corner versus blue corner. There's a story behind this fight, more than most as well with this particular one. So, really well done, brilliant storytelling, and a fitting spectacle for both guys to go out, if indeed this is their final dance inside the cage. But that was your main event for the Infinity Belt. No world title on the line. The Infinity Belt was specially commissioned for this one. Carlos Vermola will leave with that brightly coloured Infinity Belt, as I say, 48-47, 48-47, 49-46. There was a championship belt on the line, however. The interim middleweight title was up for grabs. Now, that's because Kerim Engizek, the current middleweight champion, is involved in the Tip Sport Game Changer tournament, and that championship belt is not being defended as part of the tournament. Personally, I think it should be, but it isn't. And as a result, the middleweight division is largely static because the majority of the top contenders are in the tournament. And then it just goes through with the Tip Sport Game Changer tournament. You've then got the tournament prize at the end of it. But the champion is involved in this tournament as well. So there's no way of having an external championship fight outside of that tournament. So they've commissioned an interim belt, and they've got Mahmoud Muradov, who definitely should have been in the Tip Sport Game Changer, and Patrick Kinsel, who I think would have been in the Tip Sport Game Changer had he not opted, I believe, to not be in it. So very interested to see how this fight was going to pan out, because I saw Patrick Kinsel, it felt like he mentally broke when he fought Engizek and lost his title in Frankfurt at the event in the huge stadium that I was telling you about earlier. Kinsel had been the pound for pound number one in Octagon for quite some time, was one of the poster boys for the promotion. He isn't a a trash talker. He isn't someone who goes out there and looks to generate a huge amount of buzz or to manufacture rivalries and stuff. He's just a sort of a bring your lunch pail kind of fighter. Gets in there, hard to beat, hard nosed, gets in your face, and makes life really difficult for you. And at that point, few people were able to do too much about it. But however, against Kerry Mengizek, it felt like Kinsel froze for whatever reason on the big stage and just could not snap himself out of whatever funk he'd got himself into in the early rounds. He ended up losing pretty comprehensively on the scorecards to Kerry Mengizek and losing his belt. So this fight this weekend was a huge one for Inspector Kinsel. And it was kind of the same again. Mahmoud Muradov, who had a significant reach advantage, I think a speed advantage, certainly in terms of his striking, that just meant he was able to dictate terms. He was able to decide when he wanted to come in, when he wanted to stay outside, and his grappling was good enough to keep Kinsel at bay as well. Kinsel really struggled to even just land decent shots. He was looking for single punches where he needed to really throw multi-punch combinations to get in at close range and get his mitts on Muradov and really do something with him up close. Just didn't happen. And after the fight, Kinsel, his post-fight interview I thought was quite sad to hear, because he said he couldn't look his own team in the eye, and he hadn't looked them in the eye since the fight had finished. He talked about letting them down, and he said, I feel like the most useless man in the world right now, which, you know, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in the combat sport is the most exposing sport you could be involved in, because you can have all the help and support you want and all of the people bigging you up and telling you how great you are, and you can go through all the training and all the preparation. You can leave no stone unturned. But once the cage door shuts, it's you and one other man, and you're either going to win or you're going to lose. And only one of you can walk out with the victory. And unfortunately, Patrick Kinsel was decidedly second best. He did not fight to his potential. That was not the best Patrick Kinsel we've seen, for sure. Muradov looked excellent and thoroughly deserved his victory. And it'll be very interesting to see what they do with him, because who's he going to fight? Because most of the middleweight contenders are in the tournament. So we'll see what happens with him next. But he's legit and totally deserves his victory. Huge performance from him. And as I say, a worthy winner. But for me, the story is Kinsel. What happens now? What happens now? I wondered for a minute as if he was going to put his gloves down and retire. He didn't. And I'm kind of glad he didn't, because unless you've decided before the fight that you're going to retire, I don't think it's always a good decision to decide to retire immediately in the aftermath of a fight. Take some time, think about what you want to do, assess everything. And if that was the last time we see Patrick Kinsel inside the cage, then he would have done, he would have made the decision, having really taken stock and had a really serious think and talked to the people that matter the most to him. Or maybe he uses this to bounce back. But yeah, that's two fights on the spin where Kinsel's not looked like the guy who dominated the middleweight division. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was kind of sad seeing his reaction. But on the flip side, great performance from Mahmoud Muradov, who is going to be, if not already, a big star for Octagon MMA. Former UFC middleweight, of course. But yeah, a real danger in all facets of the game. So we'll see what happens with Mac as things progress in 2025. But that was a big performance from him. As I say, fingers crossed for Patrick Kinsel that the negativity that was obviously descending on him in the aftermath of that fight, hoping those clouds can clear as soon as possible. And whatever he decides to do next, whether it's come back or whether it's hang him up, that he does that with a clear head and with that head held high, because he's had a hell of a career, particularly under the Octagon banner. Also at Octagon 72, Ivan Buchinger taking on Vladimir Lengau. Buchinger just seems to be ageless. This is the guy who initially, I think the first time a lot of people would have heard his name, certainly in the UK and definitely in Ireland, would have been when he was knocked out by Conor McGregor to win the Cage Warriors lightweight title. I think it was New Year's Eve in the Helix in Dublin. And that was the fight that propelled McGregor into the UFC. And it was a classic knockout, one shot, and then down goes Ivan Buchinger. And however, Buchinger is an absolute legend of this sport from Slovakia, and has been a two belt champion in Octagon MMA. He's still incredibly difficult for anybody to deal with. And he looks like he's working his way back to the top once again, taking on Vlado Lengau, outstanding striker, great boxing. And this was a really good fight. Lengau's moved up the weights a little bit and was settling in at lightweight. He's probably better at featherweight, in fairness. I just think there was a big strength advantage for Ivan Buchinger in this fight. But Buchinger taking him down, just really putting him through the ringer, and all credit to Lengau, who defended attempt after attempt after attempt from Buki to get the fight done by submission. And eventually, he did succumb to a rear naked choke in the last 30 seconds of that second round. He just, it was just one attempt too many to have to deal with, and Buchinger gets the win. Again, another one of these names who Octagon really can sort of hang their hat on. He's a star in that part of the world, and whenever he fights, the fans come out in force to watch him and cheer him on. A legend of the game over there, for sure. We'll see what happens. Can he get himself back into championship contention again? I mean, he's been there before. And it took someone pretty special in Losin Cater to dethrone him. So we'll see. He's got some momentum. Let's see where he goes as things progress in 2025. And the first fight of the night was really unfortunate. It was a fight I was really looking forward to. Ronald Paradisa versus Bojan Velichkovic. Velichkovic was the original winner of the Tipsport Game Changer tournament, the first ever Tipsport Game Changer tournament held at welterweight, and Bojan won that tournament. Ronald Paradisa, the former lightweight champion, who has now moved up to welterweight and was really looking to make a statement on his debut. And from the first 60 seconds of that fight, he was doing exactly that. He lit up Velichkovic like a Christmas tree in the first 60 seconds, had him in all sorts of trouble. And eventually, with Bojan lent up against the fence, Paradisa goes in there, initiates the clinch, looks to drag him down, almost like Greco-Roman style, sort of drag him to the mat. And there was an injury to Bojan. It was a hip injury by the sound of it. And for a professional MMA fighter of his experience to be tapping the canvas in submission, that tells you the amount of pain that he must have been in, because he's been in there. He's fought at the highest level in the UFC. He's won, as I say, a huge tournament in Octagon. This is not someone who is a mug, and it's not someone who quits fights. He's a very, very, very tough fighter, and we'll see. I think that might have been his retirement fight as well. He's got other interests outside of the cage that he's looking to pursue. It's just such a shame that if that is the way he goes out, he's gone out on such an anticlimax with an injury so early in a fight. But it's very, very hard to choose how you get out of the sport of mixed martial arts. It very rarely goes your way. So, but that one was particularly tough to watch. And, we wish him all the best, first off, for a quick recovery, and that whatever he has done to his hip, whether it's a dislocation or whether there's some sort of damage internally, that gets all dealt with and that he's back to full fitness for day-to-day life as much as anything else as soon as possible. And then if it is absolutely copper bottom confirmed that he's not coming back to mixed martial arts, then we wish him all the very best in his future endeavors. As for Ronald Paradisa, he was absolutely gutted to begin with. He looked visibly upset and angry and pissed off that his big moment was kind of taken from him, because he was well on the way to getting the first round finish. And then the finish, like that euphoric moment of getting a TKO or getting a KO or maybe even getting a submission, that was kind of stolen from him by circumstance a little bit, because the injury and the enforced stoppage of the fight took away the ability for Paradisa to stamp his authority with a highlight reel finish. Here's my debut at 170 pounds in Octagon. Look what I just did to the Tipsport Game Changer winner. Unfortunately, while he was doing great, it didn't end in the way that he would have liked. Took him a little while to sort of get that disappointment out of his system, but eventually he was celebrating in a cage, and he was pleased to have picked up the win. But yeah, it was a bit of a shame, that one. But interesting to see Ronald Paradisa at 170 pounds. He was a big lump at 155, and it took a tough weight cut to make 155. We might just see the best of Ronnie Paradisa at 170 pounds. Really looking forward to his journey continuing in his new weight class. Other notables from earlier in the night, Alina Dallasland, who a German up and coming flyweight, did really well. Good performance from her. Picked up the 3rd round TKO finish. I think that's someone who Octagon have big plans for and high hopes for as a potential star and a bit of a poster girl for women's MMA in Octagon. She picked up a big win against Dr. Rose Namajunas from Poland, as I say, 3rd round TKO. Big win for Jakub Batwowski, another one who's moving his way up. Young talent, beats Karol Rosavi, unanimous decision victory, but he's definitely a name to watch out for if you're following up-and-comers on the European scene. He's got a real talent. Jaime Cordero defeats David Hosek. Doctor stoppage due to an absolutely horrible cut just on the hairline for Hosek. I think it was an elbow from Cordero that got that job done. 2nd round TKO for him. And in the feature prelim, Daniel Didi Skvoru, sort of low-key one of my favourite fighters to watch in Octagon. I really enjoyed him in the lead up to his fight with Will Fleury. Former K1 kickboxer, has genuine knockout power with both hands and both feet. But also has got some sneaky submissions in his locker as well. His prior fight, he picked up a submission victory. He was taking on Lucas Alcina from Argentina. Now, Alcina was supposed to be fighting Frederick Vosgronier, who is this, you've probably seen him, he's been trending on European MMA social media. He looks like a hench Boris Johnson is the best way I can describe it. He's like Boris Johnson on the juice almost. He's absolutely ripped, stripped and striated, this guy. He's got the big mop of hair a la Boris Johnson. And he's an absolute nightmare of a grappler to deal with from what we saw on his Octagon debut. Against Lucas Alcina, who gave Carlos Vermola a lot of problems in a championship fight a year or so ago. This was going to be a real test for Vosgronier, but unfortunately, the Neanderthal Vosgronier was not able to make the fight. He had to pull out with like a week or so to go, maybe 2 weeks. They needed a replacement. Up steps the number 3 ranked light heavyweight contender, Daniel Didi Skvor, in a fight with very little upside for him, other than the good graces of Octagon MMA promoters. Steps in against Lucas Alcina in a dangerous fight, because Alcina is a dangerous dude and a guy who's, happy to stand and bang, but he's also a problem on the mat as well. He's pretty solid on the mat as well. And Didi Skvor put on a decent performance and did a really good job on him. Stopped Alcina in the 2nd round. Didn't look overly happy with his own work, but I thought on short notice, a guy had barely trained. I think he said he trained twice in the 2 weeks leading in, or twice leading up to those 2 weeks. 2nd round TKO, and he lost that fight to Will Fleury in Birmingham, which sort of launched Fleury's run towards the title. But Skvor is very much in the mix, and maybe if he gets another big win, he could be knocking on the door of a rematch with Big Will Fleury. So who knows? We might see those two dance again inside the Octagon cage at some point in the next 12 months or so. But big win for him. Like watching him fight. He's got fun fighting style. He's got that sort of evil henchman look about him as well. He looks like someone who'd be like one of the bad guys in like a 80s crime film, But yeah. Great performance from him. Always exciting to watch, and stepping in on short notice and getting the job done like that. Extra brownie points for Daniel Didi Skvor. Yeah, really fun event. Octagon 72. They've announced they're going to do Octagon, I think it's going to be 74. They're going to do in Stvanica at the open air tennis court on the island there in Prague. they'd actually outgrown that arena, which is why they were doing shows. They've started doing shows in the football stadium in front of 26,000. They've added an extra show and they're going back there, which is great because I never got to go to Stvanica, which as a venue looks incredible for outdoor MMA in the summer. It looks amazing. It's a tennis stadium, open air tennis stadium, and the events there look phenomenal. You go back through some of their past events that they held there. They did a double header a year or two ago there. They did like a Friday night, Saturday night, I think, and it was absolutely brilliant. And yeah, they're going to go back. Cecily Bolander is going to be putting her title on the line in the main event, and the 4 Tip Sport Game Changer quarterfinal bouts at middleweight will also be on that card, including Kerry Mengazek, the champion, against our very own Mick, the Height and Hammer Stanton. That should be a great fight. But all 4 of those Tip Sport Game Changer quarterfinals are scheduled to be on that card at Stvanica. So very excited to hear about that card. Fingers crossed I might be able to get over to that one. I wasn't able to get over to Prague this weekend. It was my daughter's birthday this weekend, so had some pressing matters to attend to at home. But the next one in Prague at Stvanica, as I say, I think it's Octagon 74. That's one that, fingers crossed, if I can pull a few strings, make a few things happen, that's one I would love to get over there and be there to be a part of in person. The huge stadium show in Frankfurt, Germany was a huge hit. Thoroughly enjoyed that. But I think about 6,000 to 8,000, I think they hold at the tennis stadium in Stvanica. I think that's just a perfect setting. It's close enough and without being too vast. But you've got that outdoor feel. I think it would be a fantastic venue to compete in and to also work in and cover some fights. So we'll see how that all pans out. But Octagon doing great things and continuing to grow. It's a shame that it hasn't taken off in the UK like they had hoped. They invested in trying to make some big things happen in the UK, and for whatever reason, they just couldn't get the traction over here. They most certainly have the traction in mainland Europe, in Germany, and obviously in their homelands of Czechia and Slovakia. So yeah, always worth checking their shows out. And it was a big show for them on Saturday night, with Mahmoud Muradov being crowned the interim middleweight champion and Carlos Vermola getting the bragging rights and claiming the trilogy victory over Attila Vey to walk home with the Infinity Belt. Great stuff at Octagon 72. All right, and we'll wrap things up this week with a very quick look ahead to this weekend, where the UFC breaks new ground in Baku, Azerbaijan. First time they've been there for a UFC event, and they got a banger of a fight in the main event. Jamal Hill, former light heavyweight champion, headlining the card against RDX Sports' new signing and brand ambassador Khalil Roundtree Jr., former title challenger rather, who really did get in there and put pedal to the metal against Alex Pereira in a real slugfest. He's going in there with Jamal Hill in the main event. I can't see this being anything but fireworks. A great, great main event for the people of Baku. That should be a fantastic headliner. Lightweights in the co-main event. This has also got fight of the night potential. Rafael Fiziev taking on Ignacio Bahamondes. Unbelievable style matchup. I mean, this is like video game stuff between these two. That's going to be unbelievable at 155 pounds. We also have Tafiq Musayev. Tafiq Musayev, former winner of the Rising Lightweight Grand Prix, now in the UFC, from Azerbaijan, competing on home soil. That is going to be an emotional moment indeed for the lightweight. He takes on Mick Beck Oralby on the main card. Curtis Blades is back in action at heavyweight, taking on Rizvan Kuniev. Nazim Sadikov taking on Nicholas Motta, and Mohamed Naimov taking on Bogdan Grad. That is your main card. That is live on ABC stateside and ESPN Plus. It'll be TNT Sports and UFC Fight Pass here in the UK. Just looking down the prelims, the name that leaps off the page, and why is it so low down on the card? I don't know. Oban Elliott, second fight in the evening against Ko Seok Hyun at welterweight. Oban Elliott is just must-see TV whenever you put him in front of a camera. Whether it's outside the cage, whether it's inside the cage, he is must-see TV. Second fight on, according to the bout sheet that I currently have at welterweight. We'll see if that all gets rejigged. I mean, to me, he's a main card fighter, but we'll see how it goes. They've got to tailor the card to the local market, and maybe a pro wrestling fan from Wales is not the ideal market match for Azerbaijan. But who knows? Who knows? He'll put on a show. No doubt about it. He will put on a show. Who else do we have on that preliminary card? Tagir Ulanbekov, rising flyweight prospect, taking on Azat Maxim. Ismail Nardiev, the Austrian wonder boy, as he used to be known. I don't know whether he's still known as that now. Taking on Park Jun-young at middleweight. Melissa Mullins taking on Daria Zheleznyakova. Hope I got that name right. At bantamweight. Hamdi Abdul Wahab at heavyweight, taking on Mohammed Usman. Just 1 week removed from his brother getting a big win. Now it's Mohammed's turn to get in there and get the job done. I wonder whether Kamaru is going to make the trip, or is making the trip to Baku for that one. We shall see. We mentioned Oban Elliott, and opening the night, Irina Alexeyeva taking on Claudia Sigula. That is your fight card for UFC Fight Night in Baku. But the ones to look out for, obviously the main event, Jamal Hill, Khalil Roundtree. The co-main event, absolute matchmaking gold, Rafael Fiziev versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Look out for Tafik Musayev. Curtis Blades is returning a really tough fight against Rizvan Kuniev. And then, obviously, earlier in the night, Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster, looking to get the party started nice and early. And the good news is, because it's in Baku, this will take place much more early in the day, much earlier in the day for us here in the UK. If you're over stateside, you've got a nice early afternoon start, or maybe even earlier than that. So it might even be a lunchtime start stateside, depending on where you're based. But yeah, who doesn't mind early fights on a Saturday? I certainly don't. It certainly beats being up at stupid o'clock in the morning at like 5:30, trying to keep your eyelids open. Even when the action's good, sometimes it can be quite tricky to keep things going without the aid of a hell of a lot of caffeine. And trust me, I consume a hell of a lot of caffeine during these big UFC events. This one shouldn't be quite so difficult in terms of the caffeine intake. Prime time in Europe. Jamal Hill, Khalil Roundtree in the main event. And RDX Sports' own Khalil Roundtree has a chance to get a huge win against a former champion to keep himself in and around that championship conversation in the 205-pound division. That one should be a lot of fun. All right, that's just about all we've got time for on the RDX Sports podcast this week. Please do hit a like, a subscribe, chuck a comment below if you want to do so. Let us know who you have got in the main event of UFC Baku. Let us know what you thought about that bizarre finish to the Paul Craig Rodolfo Bellato fight last weekend. And we've got a big card of fights, as I say, coming down the line. And then the week after, the build-up begins to UFC International Fight Week, UFC 317, a huge week of festivities going on in Las Vegas. It is International Fight Week. We've got UFC BJJ1, we've got Power Slap, we've got UFC all happening back to back to back. We've got the UFC Hall of Fame going on as well. And we've got UFC X, that huge expo with a who's who of UFC stars past and present due to be in attendance. It should be a big week. But this week, it's all about leading up to UFC Baku as the Octagon breaks new ground and heads to a new country for the very first time. And they're bringing some absolute crackers at the top of that fight card to introduce the UFC to that new region. So should be a lot of fun. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Give us a follow on the socials at RDX Sports on X, at RDX_sports on Instagram and Threads. Don't forget to like and subscribe on here on the YouTubes, and also chuck us a follow while you're at it. I'm at Simon Head Sport across all social media platforms. Thank you so much for checking out the RDX Sports podcast. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll speak to you next time.